Every once in a while, a new RPG drops that doesn't just imitate those classics we grew up with. It feels just as good as them. Quartet is one of those games. It features 4 storylines with 8 different characters and a battle system that hooked me much faster than I expected. Huge shout out to Something Classic for sending me a review code so I can dive in early. Now, let's talk about why Quartet might just be this year's indie RPG that you can't afford to skip. The exact moment Quartet sold me? When its combat system stopped feeling like nostalgia and started feeling genuinely fresh. But the battle system is not the only thing Quartet has going for it. Before we jump into the review though, if you love JRPGs as much as I do and you want honest reviews without all that fluff, smash that subscribe button so you never miss out. Now with that being said, let's jump into Quartet and why this is the indie RPG you need to keep your sights on. So, what is Quartet? Well, Quartet is a retro-inspired RPG scheduled for release on August 26, 2025, developed by Something Classic that absolutely nails what so many throwback indies miss. It's concise, it's to the point, it isn't full of fluff, and nothing feels like padding, and it just gives you a great and fun experience. These days, RPGs feel a bit too long. Sometimes I just want a quick RPG I can burn through in a weekend easily, or something to bridge the difference between those incredibly long RPGs. So if you grew up loving the Super Nintendo and PlayStation RPGs, this is going to feel like jumping back in time to that era, only polished with modern quality of life features that make it so much easier to enjoy today. Is it perfect? Of course not. Few games are. There are rough edges, and I'll get into that later, but this is my early stance. If you love turn-based combat and character-driven stories, Quartet is worth your attention immediately. And if you're still on the fence, grab a drink and sit down with your favorite snack because in the next few minutes, I'm going to break down exactly where it shines, where it stumbles, and whether or not it deserves a spot in your RPG library. So let's really just jump into what Quartet is exactly. At its core, it's a classic style RPG built around 4 separate storylines that eventually intertwine. Think of it kind of like Dragon Quest IV's character chapters, but you're able to choose them in any order, such as the Wild Arms games. Each of these 4 story arcs introduces a pair of characters, and together they make up a cast of 8 playable heroes. What I really enjoyed is that Quartet doesn't just throw you into one massive story right away. Instead, you're dropped into these smaller, tightly written episodes that let you get to know each of the characters individually before being introduced to the grand scheme of things. It's a design choice that makes the world feel more approachable, and it keeps the pacing snappy. You don't have those hour-long prologues where you're just pressing X over and over and over as you get through the long-winded story. And by separating each of these characters' stories, it prevents you from getting overwhelmed as well. Quartet is very intentional about feeling like a lost 16-bit classic. The pixel art looks as if it's straight out of the 90s but with more polish. There's cleaner animations, smoother menus, and quality of life systems that make it much friendlier to play in 2025 than an actual game from the 90s. You have various font styles from multiple pixel to an HD font, and according to a tweet from Something Classic, there is a 2x speed option, but I couldn't figure out how to trigger it. Not that it's necessary. The combat is plenty quick, and while the story setup is episodic, it's not just nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. The developers, Something Classic, built it to feel familiar without being predictable. That's a big part of why Quartet works. It takes the foundation of the games we grew up with and then adds just enough modern sensibility to keep it engaging enough. But what really makes or breaks any JRPG isn't just the setup. It's the combat, and that's where Quartet surprised me the most. Quartet uses a classic turn-based battle system, but employs a few things to keep it feeling unique. Each of your 8 heroes brings a distinct role. You have attackers, you have characters that specialize in buffing or debuffing, and healers. And the real fun of Quartet comes from how you combine each of these roles to create some very broken setups. For example, you might have one character lowering an enemy's defenses or buffing up your own characters, while another sets up for a combo skill. and while you have another character that sets up support magic to keep your party alive. It's very simple on the surface and it's been done before, but the game constantly pushes you to think ahead to prevent your party from reaching its untimely demise. Another thing that I really appreciated is the game encourages you to use all 8 characters, and you can swap them in and out at any point with absolutely no penalty. You can have up to 4 characters in battle at one time, and characters in the back row rapidly recover their AP or ability points. So you might want to shoot off your most powerful attacks and then switch them to the back row while they recover their ability points. Another thing I really appreciate is the pacing of battles. Encounters don't feel way too long. Trash mobs go down fast if you know their weaknesses and you're paying attention, but bosses are a little bit more deep. They force you to actually use your entire toolkit and all 8 characters rather than spamming the same skill over and over. That balance kept me engaged the entire time. However, by the end of the game, it ended up just spamming AP healing items and abusing all of the most overpowered attacks repeatedly while you're buffed. There's also a clever sense of progression without the grind. I never felt underleveled. However, with that being said, there is a huge difficulty spike in the last chapter of the game, with enemies that seem to hit 2/3 of your health in a single hit. Even some that way overkill you. I had points where I had 800 HP total, but I ended up taking 1200 points of damage. That was very rare though. It's not that bad for most enemies. If you're like me and you've played a lot of indie retro RPGs that look great but feel shallow in combat, this is where Quartet really shines. It doesn't really do anything to reinvent the genre, but it polishes the formula so well that you'll catch yourself saying, just one more battle, way more than you should. And that's just the gameplay loop, but let's be honest, combat means absolutely nothing if the story doesn't pull you in and keep you interested. So let's talk about how Quartet handles its characters as well as its narrative. Of course, an RPG lives or dies by its characters, and Quartet takes a really smart approach here. Instead of throwing you into a single massive world-ending crisis right from the start, the game begins with 4 smaller story arcs, each introducing a pair of characters and giving you a more personal connection to those characters. As I mentioned previously, it's like Dragon Quest IV, with its character chapters that go into details about each character and make you love them. These arcs are like bite-sized adventures, lasting about an hour each. One might center around political intrigue, and another is about a personal vendetta, while a third leans into classic JRPG humor. By giving each set of characters their own spotlight, Quartet makes sure you actually care about the cast before bringing them together. Quartet does feature side quests as well to expand on these stories, however, they're at the very end of the game, right before the final dungeon. I would say that they're also necessary as well. If you don't do them, character stories feel almost unfinished, so I would highly suggest them. Luckily, none of them are missable. But what surprised me the most is the tone. The writing doesn't seem to be trying to be overly edgy or self-serious, but it's not shallow either. There's a balance of warmth, dry humor, and emotional weight that feels right at home in the golden age of RPGs. One of them almost breaks your heart right from the get-go. You'll laugh at the banter, but when the stories get serious, the dialogue actually makes you care, and it doesn't feel phoned in. Now, all of the characters that you have, their archetypes feel very familiar. You have the stoic soldier, the eccentric mage, the clever rogue, a magical hippopotamus, but Quartet gives them quirks and relationships that slowly peel back their layers as it gets deeper and deeper into what these characters even are. The episodic structure helps with this, because you're not overwhelmed with learning about 8 characters all at once. Instead, you get to meet them 2 at a time. You get to learn their personality and watch how their dynamics shift once the party starts coming together. And the thing is, it kind of works. By the time the stories begin to overlap, you're already invested in each character for different reasons, so seeing them collide is genuinely exciting, and it actually does so in a very unique way that you won't expect. It reminded me of why I fell in love with JRPGs in the first place. I love that feeling that every party member matters. Without giving spoilers, I'll just say this. Quartet's story isn't trying to be the most complex RPG you ever played. What it does aim for is amazing character focus and great pacing, and in that, it succeeds. There are a few big surprises that dropped my jaw and made me question how the developers managed to shock me like that, so it's not all predictable. But of course, no matter how good the characters are, how good their story is, and how good the gameplay is, this all needs the right stage to shine on. So let's talk about Quartet's presentation, the visuals, the music, and how it all comes together to sell the experience. Quartet makes it very clear what inspired it. It looks like a lost Super Nintendo RPG that somehow got polished for modern hardware. The pixel art is clean and colorful, but it's the little details that make it shine. Character sprites have just enough animation to give them that personality. Those spell effects pop without overstaying their welcome, and the environments have that handcrafted feel that makes you just want to wander around just a little tiny bit longer. One thing that I do appreciate is that Quartet doesn't overload the screen. You get a lot of these retro-inspired indie RPGs that just go for too much detail and end up looking muddy. Here, everything is sharp and readable. The dungeons, the UI, the battle menus, it respects your eyes as much as it respects your time. Regardless, if you want the classic pixel font or the shining HD font, it all looks great. What I appreciated is they enhanced the font for accessibility reasons. Are you old and your eyes don't work like they used to? Quartet's got your back with this amazing HD style font, which somehow fits the retro style. And the music, honestly, this is where Quartet really surprised me. The soundtrack is clearly inspired by that classic RPG era. You have those whimsical town themes and tense battle tracks, but it doesn't just feel like it's copying the games from the 90s. It has like this jazzy tone to it, and I adored it. Each piece feels distinct, and more importantly, it sticks with you. I caught myself humming a few of the battle tracks even after I finished playing it, and that's always a good sign. Together, the visuals and audio do exactly what you need to. They sell the feeling. You're not just playing a retro-style RPG, you're experiencing it. But presentation only carries a game so far. The question is, does Quartet respect your time as a player? That's where the quality of life features, performance, and overall experience come in. Here's the thing about retro-inspired RPGs. A lot of them, they look great and they're full of nostalgia, but once you sit down to play, they remind you of all the things we don't miss from the 90s. Those endless random encounters, those clunky menus, no idea where to go next. Quartet avoids almost all of those pitfalls. The UI is clean and responsive. Menus are not needlessly complicated. You can check equipment and abilities without digging through a dozen layers, and navigating the world feels straightforward. Battles start quickly and they end quickly. You're not waiting around for long animations to finish. That makes it really easy to slip into the just one more fight rhythm. And on top of that, no random encounters. You can see every encounter on screen. Now this has its positives as well as its negatives. If you want to grind at some point, it makes it incredibly difficult because you need to leave the entire area, and a lot of areas in the game, you're locked into them until you finish it. So it makes it impossible to grind. But like I said before, you don't really have to grind until the very end of the game, so that's really not a concern. Saving and retrying are also stress-free. Quartet lets you save anywhere you want at any time, so you're never punished for experimenting or putting the game down when life interrupts. If you've ever lost progress in a retro RPG because you forgot to find a save point, you'll appreciate just how generous this game is. There's even a story section in the menu to tell you what just happened or where to go next. Performance-wise, it runs smoothly across the board, which is not a surprise. I mean, it's a retro-style RPG. Load times are nearly instant, transitions are crisp, and whether you're on a PC or some handheld PC, it works fine. The game is perfect on the Steam Deck. I had no issues with it, and there's no fighting with the game to enjoy it. And that's more important than a lot of people realize. The best part though, you don't have to grind for hours to feel strong. Don't need a wiki open on your second monitor, and you don't need to babysit the difficulty curve. It's designed so that every session of play feels rewarding, whether you play for only 20 minutes or 2 hours. And for me, that's one of Quartet's biggest wins. It captures the feeling that we had growing up with RPGs, but it doesn't drag along all of the baggage that comes along with them. But that raises the bigger question. How long is the adventure, and is it worth the asking price? Let's talk about the value of the game. Quartet is not one of those 100-hour epics, and honestly, it doesn't even try to be. Most people are probably going to finish the main story somewhere between the 20 to 25-hour range, depending on how much side content you dive into. Personally, I think this is the sweet spot. It's long enough to feel substantial, but short enough that it doesn't overstay its welcome. Unfortunately, since the game is very on rails for the most part, the replayability isn't the most diverse. Sure, you can do the first 4 chapters in different orders, but it doesn't really change the experience all that much because they're self-contained with no carryover between them until all of the characters join together. And when you factor in the asking price, Quartet's normal price is $19.99 US, which is modest compared to the big budget RPGs out there. You're getting a really solid return on investment. You're not paying for filler, you're paying for a handcrafted adventure that respects both your time as well as your wallet. In short, Quartet doesn't try to compete on size. It competes on focus, and in a sea of bloated RPGs, that's kind of refreshing. But of course, that all leads to the big question: is Quartet a must-buy, a wait for a sale, or one to skip? Let's wrap this up with my final thoughts. So after spending a solid amount of time with Quartet and playing it from start to finish, here are my thoughts of the game. This is a love letter to classic RPGs that actually understands what made them great. The combat is strategic without being overwhelming, the characters are memorable, and that presentation, the pixel art, the animations, the music, it really pulls you in. That said, it's not perfect. Some story threads are a little bit predictable, and if you're looking for a sprawling 100-hour epic with every possible side quest and 17 games that all tie into each other, this is nothing like that. This is just a one-shot to my experience. Who knows, maybe we'll do a Quartet too. Maybe it'll be the next Legend of Heroes series, who knows? Okay, probably not. But it's concise, it's to the point, and doesn't have any fluff. But it does what it sets out to do: give players a focused, nostalgic, yet modernized RPG experience. And with that, it absolutely delivers. So here's my thought. You should buy it if you love turn-based combat, character-driven stories, and indie RPGs with that retro feel. However, you should wait for it if you're unsure about shorter RPGs or you want to see how the community reacts to the game's story twists. And last but not least, you might want to skip it if you don't really enjoy classic RPG mechanics or if you can't handle the pixel art aesthetic. However, personally, I think you should give it a chance because that would be a huge mistake. Quartet is one of the more enjoyable indie RPGs I've played this year. It's compact, it's polished, and it nails that sense of fun and heart that so many retro-inspired titles miss. And now I want to hear from you. Are you considering picking up Quartet? If not, let me know. What's the best indie RPG you've ever played, and why does it stick with you? Drop it in the comments below. I'll be reading and responding to as many as possible. And before you go, don't forget to like the video and hit subscribe, especially if you want more spoiler-free RPG reviews, deep dives, and recommendations from someone who's been living in this genre for decades. Your support helps me keep doing this, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. This has been Chinky, thanks so much for watching, and until the next one, have a wonderful day.